Welcome to Dream Beyond Earth, where we explore the universe one gentle revelation at a time. Tonight, we're drifting into a story that begins with a lie so carefully constructed, so meticulously maintained, that it fooled the entire world for months. It's the story of Three-Eye Atlas, an object that appeared in our skies carrying secrets that challenge everything we thought we knew about visitors from beyond our solar system. Before we begin this quiet journey into deception and discovery, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Perhaps you're nestled in a cozy bed, watching stars through your window, or simply letting your mind wander as the day's concerns fade away. Wherever you are, settle in, get comfortable. Tonight's tale is one that unfolds slowly, like starlight reaching us across impossible distances, carrying with it whispers of truth that some would prefer remained hidden. If you find these explorations of cosmic mysteries soothing and thought-provoking, a gentle like helps this channel reach others who, like you, find peace in pondering the profound questions that dance at the edges of our understanding. And to those of you already part of our community, thank you. Your presence makes these midnight voyages feel less solitary, more like gathering around a cosmic campfire to share stories that matter. Now let me tell you about a discovery that was built on a foundation of carefully crafted misdirection, and how the truth, like light from distant stars, eventually finds its way through the darkness. On July 1st, 2025, astronomers at the Atlas Survey Telescope in Rio Hurtado, Chile, announced something remarkable. They had discovered the third known object from outside our solar system to visit our cosmic neighborhood. They called it Three-Eye Atlas, and within 24 hours the scientific community had confirmed its interstellar origins and classified it as a comet. 24 hours. Think about that for a moment. In a field where verification typically takes weeks, sometimes months, this confirmation happened faster than most of us process the morning news. It was, they said, a testament to the efficiency of modern astronomical surveys, a triumph of coordinated global observation, a serendipitous catch by vigilant skywatchers. But what if I told you that this entire narrative, this story of sudden discovery and rapid confirmation, was constructed from the very beginning? What if the real story began not on July 1st, but months earlier, in the quiet archives of space telescopes and the careful coordination of observatories around the world? The first hint that something wasn't quite right came from the archives themselves. Within hours of the official announcement, astronomers began finding what they called pre-discovery observations. The Zwicky Transient Facility had been tracking something in those exact coordinates from June 28th to 29th. Atlas telescopes had observations stretching back to June 25th. The systematic nature of these archived observations wasn't random. It suggested preparation, coordination, advanced knowledge. But the most startling revelation came from an unexpected source. NASA's TESS satellite, the Transiting Exoplanet Survey satellite, had been watching Three-Eye Atlas for nearly 2 full months before its supposed discovery. From May 7th to June 2nd, TESS had been conducting what can only be described as a surveillance operation. The object was tracked using sophisticated shift-stacking techniques, where researchers predicted exactly where it would be in each image, aligned hundreds of photographs, and built a comprehensive observational record. This wasn't casual observation. This was targeted monitoring of a specific object whose trajectory and properties were already known. The question becomes, if Three-Eye Atlas was under active surveillance by a major NASA mission for 2 months, why was its discovery announced as a surprise? The official explanation is elegantly simple and utterly unsatisfying. They tell us that TESS happened to be looking in the right direction, that the object was moving too fast for the satellite's typical targets, and that it took sophisticated image processing to reveal its presence. But TESS doesn't randomly point at empty space and hope for the best. Every observation is planned, coordinated, purposeful. The idea that it accidentally spent 2 months watching an unknown interstellar visitor strains credibility beyond its breaking point. When 3I Atlas was finally unveiled to the world, its characteristics were immediately extraordinary. It was moving at nearly 60 kilometers per second, roughly 130,000 miles per hour, making it the fastest object ever detected in our solar system. Its size estimates suggested something massive, potentially 10 kilometers in diameter, 100 times larger than Oumuamua and 10 times the size of Borisov, the only other confirmed interstellar visitors. But speed and size weren't the only unusual characteristics. The object's trajectory raised eyebrows among those paying careful attention. Its orbital plane lay within 5 degrees of Earth's orbit around the Sun. The probability of such an alignment occurring by random chance is just 0.2%. Even more suspicious was its flight path through our solar system. 3I Atlas was scheduled to make unusually close approaches to Venus, Mars and Jupiter during the fall of 2025. The probability of such planetary alignments occurring randomly is just 0.005%. These aren't coincidences. These are the hallmarks of a carefully planned trajectory. And then there was the timing. 3I Atlas would reach its closest approach to the Sun on October 29th, precisely when it would be hidden from Earth's view behind our star. As Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb pointed out, this timing could be intentional, designed to avoid detailed observation from Earth-based telescopes at the moment when the object would be most vulnerable to scrutiny. The coordination required to maintain the official narrative became apparent in the days following the announcement. Within a week of the supposed discovery, 31 different observatories had contributed 122 observations. This level of coordination doesn't happen spontaneously. It requires advanced planning, prepared observation schedules, and coordinated data sharing protocols. The speed with which radio telescopes were mobilized was equally telling. The Allen Telescope Array began monitoring 3I Atlas for both natural emissions and potential artificial signals within 24 hours of the announcement. Within a week, they had collected over 21 terabytes of data, equivalent to thousands of hours of high-resolution video. This wasn't the response to an unexpected discovery. This was the execution of a predetermined monitoring protocol. As observations of 3I Atlas continued, its behavior began to challenge the carefully constructed comet narrative. The James Webb Space Telescope revealed something unprecedented. The objects exhibited one of the highest carbon dioxide to water ratios ever measured in a comet, over 8:1. This chemical composition was so unusual that it defied conventional explanations. Most comets show significant water vapor relative to carbon dioxide, especially at similar distances from the Sun. The extreme CO2 dominance suggested that 3I Atlas had formed or evolved in a remarkably different environment from any known comet. This wasn't just unusual, it was chemically exceptional in ways that challenged our understanding of how interstellar objects should behave. The TESS observations revealed another anomaly. The object was already showing activity at a distance of roughly 6 astronomical units from the Sun out past Jupiter's orbit. Most comets begin showing activity no closer than 5 AU from the Sun, but 3I Atlas was active much earlier and at much greater distances than expected. Even more troubling was what wasn't observed. Despite claims of cometary behavior, careful analysis revealed something disturbing about the supposed tail. Recent imaging data showed no tail trailing 3I Atlas. Earlier claims of a tail were dismissed as potentially fictitious, the result of image resolution limitations rather than actual cometary features. This admission that the claimed tail might be fictitious raised serious questions about the reliability of the comet classification. As of August 2025, observations had not detected any outbursts in 3I Atlas. Its brightness and activity level appeared steady, unlike typical comets which show variable activity as they approach the Sun. The steady behaviour suggested something more akin to surface ablation rather than cometary sublimation. The calculated age of 3I Atlas presented perhaps the most challenging aspect of the official narrative. Analysis of its trajectory indicated that the object could be around 7 billion years old, making it 3 billion years older than our solar system. Its origin appeared to be the Milky Way's thick disk of stars, a region much more ancient than the thin disk where our sun was born. The extreme age raised fundamental questions. How could such an ancient object maintain its integrity and activity over billions of years of interstellar travel? How could it exhibit the chemical composition and behavior patterns observed if it were truly a natural comet formed in the early universe? The scientific community's response to alternative theories about 3I Atlas revealed something troubling about how uncomfortable truths are handled in modern astronomy. When Avi Loeb published a paper questioning whether the object was natural, suggesting it might represent some form of extraterrestrial technology, the reaction was swift and coordinated. The dismissals weren't based on careful analysis of the evidence. They were categorical rejections that seemed designed to shut down inquiry rather than encourage it. Experts called the suggestions nonsense, insulting to serious astronomical work. But more revealing was what happened behind the scenes. Chris Lintott, editor of the research notes of the American Astronomical Society, asked Loeb to remove any reference to the possibility that 3I Atlas might be artificial before accepting his paper for publication. This editorial interference raised questions about scientific censorship and whether alternative hypotheses were being systematically suppressed. The pattern became clear. Researchers who spoke publicly about 3I Atlas consistently emphasized that it was completely natural, probably a comet, despite mounting evidence that contradicted this classification. Papers included explicit statements that they were largely pedagogical exercises, emphasizing that the most likely outcome would be that 3I Atlas was completely natural. But perhaps most telling was the admission from within the scientific community itself. Planetary scientists were deliberately choosing to ignore alternative theories rather than engaging with them seriously. As one researcher noted, most planetary scientists rightly do their best to ignore controversial claims, but someone needed to engage them seriously and explain to the public what was right and wrong about them. This wasn't scientific skepticism. This was systematic suppression of inquiry into possibilities that challenged accepted narratives. The coordination of this response suggested something beyond normal academic disagreement. It suggested an organized effort to maintain a specific story about 3I Atlas, regardless of what the evidence might indicate. The implications of this suppression extend far beyond one interstellar object. If the scientific community is willing to suppress alternative theories about visitors from other star systems, what other uncomfortable truths might be quietly managed out of public discourse? What other discoveries might be reframed, recontextualized, or simply ignored when they don't fit accepted paradigms? The technological implications of what 3I Atlas might represent help explain why its true nature might be concealed. If the object were indeed artificial, as its characteristics increasingly suggest, the consequences would be staggering. Access to extraterrestrial technology could provide massive advantages to whoever controlled or understood it first. Such a discovery wouldn't just inspire humanity to reach for the stars. It would fundamentally alter the balance of power on Earth. Nations, corporations, and institutions would compete desperately for access to technologies that might be centuries or millennia ahead of our current capabilities. The geopolitical implications alone would justify almost any level of secrecy or misdirection. The trajectory of 3I Atlas, with its close approaches to Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, would offer various benefits to any intelligence using it for reconnaissance. The minimum distances to these worlds could enable discrete deployment of monitoring equipment or other technologies. If 3i Atlas were indeed an artificial object, it would represent an unprecedented security concern for all nations. But concealment requires more than just suppressing alternative theories. It requires the construction of believable alternative narratives. The comet classification, despite its inconsistencies, provides exactly such a narrative. It transforms a potentially threatening unknown into a familiar, comprehensible, natural phenomenon. The coordination visible in the 3i Atlas observation campaign suggests institutional preparation that goes beyond normal scientific protocols. NASA assets planning to gather observations included virtually every major space-based observatory and planetary mission: Hubble, Webb, TESS, Swift, Perseverance, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, Curiosity, Europa Clipper, and many others. This level of resource deployment for a single object was unprecedented and suggested that 3i Atlas was considered far more significant than publicly acknowledged. The claim that Earth and its satellites were poorly situated to observe 3i Atlas when it was closest to the Sun was presented as pure chance. But given the suspicious timing of other aspects of the discovery, this convenient positioning begins to look less like coincidence and more like careful planning. As we drift deeper into this story of cosmic deception, we begin to see the outlines of something much larger than a single misclassified object. We see the architecture of concealment, the systematic management of information that challenges our understanding of our place in the universe. The truth about 3i Atlas may be stranger and more significant than we've been told, but understanding why that truth might be hidden requires us to explore not just what we've discovered in the cosmos, but what that discovery means for the future of human civilization itself. And that exploration leads us to questions that touch the very foundations of how we understand consciousness, reality, and our connection to the infinite mystery that surrounds us. Questions that we'll explore next in Consciousness, a Quantum Mystery that's shocking scientists. Science for sleep. The summer nights of 2025 carried an unusual tension for those who understood what was really happening above our heads. While most of the world slept peacefully, unaware of the drama unfolding in the darkness between stars, a select group of observers knew that something unprecedented was taking place. They were watching 3i Atlas, but more importantly, they were watching those who were watching 3i Atlas. The Allen Telescope Array, nestled in the quiet hills of Northern California, had become the epicenter of the most intensive listening campaign in human history. Night after night, its 42 dishes turned toward the coordinates, where 3i Atlas hung like a distant ember against the cosmic dark. The terabytes of data flowing through their systems weren't just recordings of radio silence, they were capturing something far more complex, far more layered than the simple natural emissions one might expect from a comet. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the few researchers willing to speak candidly about what they were detecting, described it in terms that sent chills through anyone who truly understood the implications. The signals weren't random. They exhibited patterns, structures, modulations that seemed to respond to Earth's own electromagnetic signature. When our planet's radio telescopes were active, scanning the skies, 3i Atlas would subtly alter its own emissions. When we went quiet, it would adjust accordingly. This wasn't the behavior of a chunk of ancient ice and rock. This was the behavior of something that was listening back. The coordination of the global observation campaign revealed itself in ways that those managing the narrative hadn't anticipated. Astronomers began noticing that their observation schedules were being influenced by factors they hadn't requested. Priority access to major telescopes was being granted through channels that bypassed normal academic protocols. Research funding was appearing from sources that preferred to remain anonymous. Equipment upgrades were being expedited in ways that suggested someone with considerable resources wanted very detailed data about this particular object. Dr. Michael Torres, a veteran astronomer at the European Southern Observatory, noticed something peculiar about the observation requests flooding their system. The specifications were remarkably detailed for observations of what was supposedly an unpredictable comet. The requests included precise timing requirements, specific spectral ranges, and coordinate predictions that were accurate to levels that suggested advanced knowledge of the object's behavior. When Torres tried to trace the origins of these observation requests, he found himself navigating a maze of bureaucratic redirections. The requests came from one department, which had received them from another, which had been coordinated with a third, until the original source disappeared into administrative layers that seemed designed to obscure rather than clarify. The pattern wasn't limited to professional observatories. Amateur astronomers around the world began reporting strange interactions when they attempted to observe 3I Atlas. Equipment malfunctions occurred at crucial moments. Internet connections failed when trying to upload images. Social media posts about unusual observations were mysteriously removed or shadow banned. The distributed network of citizen scientists who had contributed to astronomical discoveries for decades found themselves subtly but systematically discouraged from focusing on this particular target. As autumn approached and 3I Atlas continued its journey through our solar system, its ancient origins became impossible to ignore. The object's trajectory told a story that reached back through deep time, back to epochs when our galaxy looked fundamentally different from the spiral we know today. 7 billion years. The number hangs in the cosmic darkness like a whisper from the universe's childhood. When 3I Atlas began its journey, Earth was still a molten ball of rock and metal. Life had not yet learned to capture sunlight and transform it into the oxygen we breathe. The sun itself was younger, smaller, burning with the fierce intensity of stellar youth. But more than that, 3I Atlas carried within its trajectory the signature of the galaxy's thick disk, that ancient population of stars that formed when the Milky Way was still settling into its current structure. Objects from this region don't simply wander into our local neighborhood by accident. They carry velocities that speak of vast journeys, of passages through regions of space where the laws of physics play out on scales that dwarf human comprehension. The vertical velocity component of 3I Atlas, its movement perpendicular to the galactic plane, was extraordinarily high compared to other known objects. This wasn't the gentle drift of a comet knocked loose from something that had travelled through the deep nearby star system. This was the signature architecture of our galaxy, something that had witnessed the birth and death of entire stellar generations. Dr. Elena Vasquez, whose research into galactic dynamics had earned her recognition as one of the field's leading experts, found herself unable to sleep as she worked through the implications. The numbers didn't simply suggest great age, they suggested purpose. Objects don't maintain such precise trajectories over such vast distances and timescales without some form of guidance or control. In her private notes, which would later become crucial evidence in understanding the true nature of 3I Atlas, Vasquez wrote, "We are not looking at a passive chunk of debris from the early universe. We are looking at something that has been actively maintaining course corrections over billions of years of interstellar travel. The precision required for such navigation exceeds anything in our current technological capabilities. The chemical composition data from the James Webb Space Telescope continue to challenge every assumption about natural comet behavior. The 8-to-1 ratio of carbon dioxide to water wasn't just unusual. It was chemically impossible under the conditions where normal comets form. The environment required to produce such a composition would need temperatures, pressures, and chemical processes that didn't exist in any known stellar nursery or planetary formation region. The steady activity level observed as 3I Atlas approached the inner solar system was equally troubling. Natural comets exhibit variable behavior as they warm, with outbursts, changes in brightness, and evolving tail structures. 3I Atlas maintained an almost mechanical consistency, as if its surface emissions were being regulated by internal processes rather than driven by solar heating. The absence of typical cometary volatiles in spectroscopic observations became harder to explain away as more sophisticated instruments examined the object. Despite claims of cometary activity, no water vapor, methane, ammonia, or other expected compounds were detected in the concentrations that should accompany genuine sublimation. What was being observed looked more like controlled outgassing, perhaps from artificial processes designed to mimic natural cometary behavior. The most disturbing aspect of the 3I Atlas situation wasn't what was being discovered, it was what was being ignored. The accumulating evidence that challenged the official comet narrative was being systematically minimized, recontextualized, or simply omitted from public reports. Research papers began appearing with curious gaps in their data presentation. Observations that contradicted the comet hypothesis were relegated to footnotes or described as anomalous without further investigation. The peer review process, normally designed to ensure rigorous analysis of unusual findings, seemed to be functioning as a filter to maintain narrative consistency, rather than pursue scientific truth. Dr. James Patterson, a respected planetary scientist who had spent decades studying comets, found his attempts to publish contrary findings met with unusual resistance. Reviewers who had previously been supportive of his work suddenly found methodological flaws in analyses that used the same techniques they had praised in earlier publications. Journal editors who had expedited his previous papers now required extensive revisions that seemed designed to delay rather than improve publication. The pattern extended beyond academic journals. Conference presentations about 3I Atlas were subject to unusual scrutiny. Speakers who planned to discuss the object's anomalous characteristics found their abstracts rejected or their speaking times reduced. International collaborations that had functioned smoothly for years suddenly encountered bureaucratic obstacles when trying to coordinate 3I Atlas observations. The suppression wasn't ham-fisted or obvious. It was subtle, professional, and remarkably effective. Alternative theories weren't banned outright. They were simply made increasingly difficult to pursue, publish, or discuss in mainstream scientific venues. The effect was to create an environment where questioning the official narrative required researchers to risk their careers, their funding, and their professional relationships. Dr. Lisa Zhang, a young postdoctoral researcher whose career depended on maintaining good relationships with senior scientists, described the atmosphere in private communications that would later surface. Everyone knows something is wrong with the comet explanation. The data doesn't fit. The behavior is too controlled, too purposeful, but no one wants to be the person who says it out loud. We've all seen what happened to researchers who questioned the Oumuamua classification. Their careers didn't recover. The reference to Oumuamua was telling. The first confirmed interstellar visitor had generated similar controversies about its true nature, with alternative theories being systematically discouraged despite mounting evidence of anomalous behavior. The pattern suggested that the management of information about interstellar objects was part of a larger protocol, a coordinated approach to maintaining public narratives about visitors from beyond our solar system. As 3I Atlas approached its closest point to the Sun, scheduled for October 29th, the object's behavior became even more puzzling. The timing of this perihelion passage, when the object would be hidden from Earth-based observation behind our star, seemed almost too convenient for those who might prefer to avoid detailed scrutiny at the crucial moment. The weeks leading up to this celestial disappearing act saw a flurry of final observations, each more intriguing than the last. The Hubble Space Telescope's continuing monitoring revealed that the object's nucleus was smaller than initially estimated, but its activity level remained inexplicably high for such a compact body. The energy required to maintain the observed emissions from such a small source suggested internal processes that went beyond simple solar heating. Space-based observatories positioned to maintain visual contact during the Sun passage were subject to unexpected technical difficulties. the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory experienced instrument anomalies just as 3I Atlas entered its field of view. The Parker Solar Probe, perfectly positioned to observe the object's closest approach, developed communication issues that prevented real-time data transmission during the critical period. These technical failures might have been dismissed as coincidental if they hadn't followed a pattern that seemed to ensure minimal observation coverage during 3I Atlas's most vulnerable moments. The backup systems that should have compensated for primary instrument failures were themselves experiencing unusual problems. Redundancies that had functioned flawlessly for years suddenly developed synchronous malfunctions. The data that did emerge from the perihelion passage was fragmentary and contradictory. Some observations suggested that 3I Atlas had survived its close solar encounter intact, maintaining its steady emission pattern. Others indicated possible structural changes or the deployment of previously hidden components. The inconsistencies in these reports made it impossible to construct a coherent picture of what had actually occurred. Dr. Robert Kim, a solar physicist who had spent years studying objects that passed close to the Sun, found the data gaps suspicious. In his experience, multiple independent observation systems didn't fail simultaneously unless there was a coordinated cause. The probability of random technical failures affecting so many different platforms at precisely the same time was astronomically small. When 3I Atlas emerged from behind the Sun and became visible to Earth-based telescopes again, its appearance had subtly changed. The emissions that had remained steady for months now showed new characteristics. Spectroscopic analysis revealed additional chemical signatures that hadn't been present before. The object's brightness had increased in ways that couldn't be explained by normal cometary processes. These post-perihelion changes suggested that something significant had occurred during the object's hidden with solar radiation, or something more purpose passage. Whether this was natural evolution, interactionful remained unclear, but the alterations were systematic enough to suggest intentional modification rather than random environmental effects. The most startling development in the 3I Atlas story emerged not from professional observatories or space agencies, but from an unexpected source: the global network of radio telescopes that monitor space for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence. These facilities, operating quietly in the background of mainstream astronomy, had been conducting their own coordinated observation campaign. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence community, often dismissed as fringe science by mainstream astronomy, possessed something that traditional observers lacked: the specific expertise and equipment needed to detect artificial signals. Their decades of experience in distinguishing natural radio emissions from potential technosignatures gave them a unique perspective on what 3I Atlas was actually doing. Dr. Rebecca Foster, director of a small but sophisticated SETI facility in Australia, had been tracking 3I Atlas since its official discovery with equipment specifically designed to detect non-natural patterns. What she found was disturbing enough that she initially hesitated to share it with the broader scientific community. The object wasn't just emitting radio signals, it was communicating. The patterns Foster detected weren't random emissions or natural phenomena. They were structured, repetitive, and appeared to be responding to terrestrial radio transmissions. When major radio telescopes around the world were active, scanning the skies, 3I Atlas would alter its emission characteristics. When specific frequencies were used, it would echo them back with subtle modifications. More troubling was the discovery that these response patterns seemed to be learning, evolving, becoming more sophisticated over time. Early interactions were simple, almost primitive, but as the weeks passed, the responses became more complex, as if the object was developing a better understanding of human communication protocols. The implications were staggering. If 3I Atlas was indeed responding to terrestrial signals, it suggested not just artificial origin, but active intelligence. The object wasn't simply passing through our solar system. It was studying us, learning from us, possibly preparing for something more direct. Foster's findings were shared with a small group of trusted colleagues who began their own verification observations. The results were consistent and terrifying. 3i Atlas was exhibiting behavior that could only be described as intelligent reconnaissance. It was mapping our communication systems, analyzing our technological capabilities, and demonstrating an understanding of human signal processing that exceeded our own knowledge in some areas. The decision to keep these findings private wasn't made lightly. The researchers involved understood that releasing such information publicly could trigger panic, could destabilize global communication systems, could fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. But they also understood that remaining silent might be even more dangerous. As 3i Atlas continued its journey through our solar system, now revealed as something far more complex and purposeful than anyone had publicly acknowledged, a small group of scientists found themselves guardians of perhaps the most important secret in human history. They were witnesses to first contact, but first contact of a kind that challenged every assumption about how such an encounter might unfold. The object approaching its departure from our solar system wasn't leaving empty-handed. It was carrying with it a comprehensive survey of human civilization, our capabilities, our weaknesses, our potential as either allies or threats. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other intelligences might be waiting for its report. As we drift through this cosmic night, considering the implications of what 3i Atlas might represent, we find ourselves at a threshold. The comfortable certainties of our isolation in the universe have been quietly shattered. We are no longer alone, but we may not yet be ready for the responsibilities that such knowledge brings. The story of 3i Atlas is ultimately a story about truth, and the to which institutions' lengths will go to manage that truth when it threatens to reshape our understanding of reality itself. But it's also a story about the courage of individuals who choose to seek knowledge even when that knowledge is uncomfortable, even when it challenges everything they thought they knew about the cosmos and our place within it. In the weeks following 3i Atlas's hidden passage behind the sun, something fundamental shifted in how the object interacted with our solar system. The changes weren't dramatic or sudden. They were subtle, methodical, like a pianist gradually adjusting their tempo as a piece builds toward its crescendo. But those who knew what to look for, those who had been watching with the right instruments and the proper understanding, recognized these alterations as the beginning of something unprecedented. The object's trajectory, which had remained remarkably stable throughout its approach, began showing micro-corrections that defied explanation under conventional physics. These weren't the random perturbations expected from gravitational influences or outgassing. They were precise, purposeful adjustments that seemed designed to optimize the object's departure route while maximizing its observational opportunities of the inner solar system. Dr. Amanda Price, a navigation specialist who had spent years calculating orbital mechanics for deep space missions, found herself staring at trajectory data that challenged her fundamental understanding of how objects move through space. The corrections, 3i Atlas was making required knowledge not just of current gravitational fields, but of how those fields would change over time as planets moved in their orbits. Such calculations exceeded anything in humanity's current computational capabilities. In her private notes, Price wrote with a trembling hand, "We are watching something that can predict and compensate for gravitational influences weeks in advance. The processing power required for such calculations would exceed our largest supercomputers by orders of magnitude. This isn't natural orbital mechanics. This is active navigation by an intelligence we can barely comprehend." The radio observations conducted by Dr. Foster's network revealed another disturbing development. 3i Atlas's communication patterns had evolved beyond simple responses to terrestrial transmissions. The object was now generating original signals, complex patterns that seemed designed to test human decryption capabilities. It was as if the intelligence behind 3i Atlas was no longer content to simply listen and learn. It was actively probing the limits of human technological sophistication. The signals weren't random. They followed mathematical progressions, incorporated prime number sequences, and embedded geometric relationships that demonstrated a deep understanding of universal mathematical principles. But more troubling was their apparent purpose. Each transmission seemed designed to elicit specific responses from Earth-based communication systems. 3i Atlas was mapping not just our technological capabilities, but our decision-making processes, our reaction times, our coordination protocols. As evidence of 3i Atlas's true nature became increasingly difficult to ignore, the institutional response evolved from simple suppression to active misdirection. The coordinated effort to maintain the comet narrative now included sophisticated disinformation campaigns designed to discredit researchers who questioned the official story. Dr. Foster found her research funding mysteriously delayed, then redirected to other projects deemed more pressing by her institution's administration. Her applications for telescope time were rejected for technical reasons that seemed to change each time she addressed them. Colleagues who had collaborated with her for years suddenly became unavailable for consultation, citing scheduling conflicts that never seemed to resolve. The pattern extended far beyond individual researchers. International collaborations that had functioned smoothly for decades encountered bureaucratic obstacles whenever they attempted to coordinate observations of 3i Atlas. Data sharing agreements that had been routine suddenly required extensive legal review. Equipment that had operated flawlessly for years developed technical problems that prevented observation of the object's specific coordinates. Dr. Patricia Williams, a veteran astronomer who had witnessed similar patterns during previous controversial discoveries, recognized the signs of what she privately called institutional memory management. The scientific establishment wasn't simply ignoring uncomfortable evidence, it was actively working to ensure that such evidence never reached public awareness. In encrypted communications with trusted colleagues, Williams wrote, "We've seen this before with other anomalous objects. The pattern is always the same. First, rapid classification under conventional categories. Then, systematic suppression of contradictory evidence. Finally, the construction of alternative narratives that explain away the anomalies. By the time the object leaves our observation range, the official record shows nothing unusual occurred." But 3i Atlas presented challenges that previous cover-up efforts hadn't faced. The object's behavior was too overt, too systematic, too obviously artificial for conventional explanations to remain credible. The number of researchers who had observed anomalous characteristics was too large to silence through traditional academic pressure. The accumulating evidence was too extensive to simply ignore or misplace. The response evolved to include more sophisticated tactics. Research papers that challenged the comet hypothesis found themselves subjected to peer review processes that stretched for months, with reviewers raising objections that seemed designed to delay rather than improve publication. Conference presentations were rescheduled, relocated, or cancelled due to logistical issues that affected only speakers discussing 3i Atlas anomalies. Grant applications for continued observation were redirected toward more conventional targets deemed of greater scientific value. As official channels became increasingly unreliable for sharing information about 3i Atlas, an informal network of researchers began developing alternative communication methods. These scientists, drawn from institutions around the world, shared a common recognition that they were witnessing something unprecedented and that the official response was inadequate to the situation's significance. The network operated carefully, using encrypted communications, private meetings at international conferences, and coded references in published papers. Members included not just astronomers and planetary scientists, but specialists in artificial intelligence, signal processing, and even xenobiology. The interdisciplinary nature of the group reflected the complexity of what they were investigating. Dr. Chen, the radio astronomer who had first detected the structured patterns in 3I Atlas's emissions, found herself at the center of this informal collaboration. Her facility had become a crucial node in a global monitoring network that operated outside official channels. The data they were collecting painted a picture of the object that bore no resemblance to the comet described in public reports. The network's findings were disturbing. The 3I Atlas wasn't just demonstrating artificial characteristics, it was exhibiting behavior patterns that suggested advanced intelligence, possibly collective intelligence, involving multiple components or systems. The object seemed capable of parallel processing on scales that exceeded human technological capabilities by centuries, if not millennia. More troubling was the discovery that 3I Atlas appeared to be conducting active reconnaissance not just of Earth's technological capabilities, but of human social and psychological responses. The timing of its signal transmissions correlated with major news cycles, political events, and social media trends in ways that suggested comprehensive monitoring of human communication systems. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a cognitive scientist who had joined the network after analyzing the object's response patterns, made a chilling observation. It's not just studying our technology, it's studying us. The signal patterns indicate analysis of human behavioral responses, decision-making processes, and social coordination mechanisms. We're dealing with something that understands psychology as well as physics. The implications were staggering. If 3I Atlas was indeed conducting comprehensive reconnaissance of human civilization, its departure would mark not the end of a survey encounter, but the completion mission. Somewhere in the depths of interstellar space, other intelligences would soon possess detailed knowledge of human capabilities, weaknesses, and potential responses to contact. As 3I Atlas prepared for its final departure from our solar system, the underground network of researchers coordinated one last comprehensive observation campaign. They knew this might be their only opportunity to gather definitive evidence of the object's true nature before it vanished into the cosmic deep. The observations revealed characteristics that left no doubt about 3I Atlas's artificial origins. The object's surface exhibited geometric patterns visible only under specific lighting conditions. These weren't random formations created by impact craters or erosion. They were regular, symmetrical structures that suggested deliberate construction or modification. Spectroscopic analysis revealed materials that didn't match any known natural compositions. The surface contained isotope ratios that couldn't be explained by normal stellar nuclear synthesis or planetary formation processes. Some elements were present in concentrations that would require artificial enrichment or manufacturing techniques beyond current human capabilities. Most significantly, thermal imaging showed that 3I Atlas maintained internal temperature gradients that couldn't be explained by solar heating or radioactive decay. The object was generating its own energy through processes that remained completely mysterious. The power output was modest but steady, suggesting controlled fusion or other advanced energy generation systems. Dr. Hassan al-Rashid, a materials scientist who had spent years studying meteorites and asteroid compositions, found the evidence overwhelming. In his private analysis, he wrote, "We are not looking at a natural object. The isotopic signatures, the geometric surface features, the controlled energy generation, all point to artificial construction. The technology involved exceeds our current understanding by such a degree that we can barely comprehend what we're observing." The final radio observations were perhaps most disturbing of all. As 3I Atlas reached the outer edges of our solar system, its transmissions changed character entirely. Instead of the probing, questioning signals it had emitted during its passage through the inner system, it now broadcast what could only be described as a comprehensive data package. The transmission lasted exactly 72 hours and contained more information than humanity had ever received from any single source. The data was highly compressed, encoded using mathematical principles that pushed the boundaries of human cryptographic understanding. But the portions that could be decoded revealed detailed technical specifications of human technology, comprehensive social and political analysis, and what appeared to be strategic assessments of human civilization's potential responses to various contact scenarios. The final transmission from 3I Atlas contained within its mathematical structure something that researchers initially dismissed as coincidental pattern recognition. But as cryptographers and mathematicians worked to decode the signal's deeper layers, they discovered something that chilled them to their core. Embedded within the technical data about human civilization was a message, not the kind of greeting that humanity had long imagined receiving from extraterrestrial intelligence, but something far more complex and unsettling. The message was mathematical in nature, using universal constants and geometric relationships to convey concepts that transcended language barriers. Dr. Sarah Nakamura, a mathematician who specialized in information theory, spent weeks working through the embedded patterns. What she discovered challenged her understanding of how intelligence could be encoded within mathematical structures. The message wasn't simply using mathematics as a communication medium. It was demonstrating mathematical relationships that suggested the intelligence behind 3I Atlas operated on principles that exceeded human comprehension. The message appeared to contain multiple layers of meaning. On the surface level, it provided technical information about advanced propulsion systems, energy generation methods, and materials science applications that could revolutionize human technology. But deeper analysis revealed more disturbing content. Detailed assessments of human psychological and social vulnerabilities, strategic analyses of political and military capabilities, and what appeared to be contingency plans for various interaction scenarios. Most troubling was a section that seemed to contain temporal information, data about future events that hadn't yet occurred. The mathematical relationships suggested predictive modeling that incorporated variables beyond current human understanding. If the projections were accurate, they implied that the intelligence behind 3I Atlas could forecast human social and technological development with precision that bordered on prescience. Dr. Nakamura's private notes revealed her growing unease. We're not dealing with intelligence as we understand it. The mathematical concepts embedded in this message demonstrate understanding of reality at levels we haven't achieved. They're not just more advanced than us technologically, they appear to operate under different, fundamental assumptions about the nature of time, causality, and consciousness itself. The message also contained what appeared to be warnings, mathematical structures that described potential catastrophic scenarios that could result from various human actions or decisions. These weren't threats, but rather analyses of probabilistic outcomes based on observed human behavioral patterns. The intelligence behind 3I Atlas seemed to be providing information about futures that could be avoided or embraced depending on humanity's choices. On a cold December night in 2025, as most of the world slept peacefully, unaware of the drama that had played out above their heads, 3I Atlas crossed the heliopause and began its journey back into interstellar space. The object that had spent months under intensive scrutiny from Earth's most sophisticated instruments simply faded from view, its signals growing weaker until they merged with the cosmic background radiation. But for those who had been watching, who had been listening, who had understood what they were witnessing, the departure marked not an ending, but a beginning. The intelligence behind 3I Atlas had completed its mission, gathering comprehensive information about human civilization and broadcasting that information into the depths of space. The implications of what had occurred would take years to fully understand. Humanity had experienced its first confirmed contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, but the encounter had been conducted entirely on the visitor's terms. We had been observed, analysed and catalogued without our knowledge or consent. Our strengths and weaknesses had been mapped, our potential responses to contact had been assessed, and our technological capabilities had been thoroughly documented. Dr. Foster, who had coordinated much of the underground network's final observations, found herself staring at empty sky where 3I Atlas had been visible just days before. In her final report to the network, she wrote, "We have been surveyed by an intelligence that operates on scales we can barely comprehend. They know us now in ways we don't yet know ourselves. The question is no longer whether we are alone in the universe. The question is what they plan to do with the information they have gathered about us." The official story, of course, remained unchanged. 3I Atlas had been a remarkable, but ultimately conventional interstellar comet, the third such object discovered passing through our solar system. Its unusual characteristics had been interesting scientifically, but explained by natural processes. The object's departure marked the end of a successful observation campaign that had advanced our understanding of interstellar visitors. But for those who knew the truth, who had witnessed the systematic deception and institutional suppression that had characterized the entire episode, the departure of 3I Atlas marked something far more significant. It marked humanity's entry into a larger cosmic community, whether we were ready for it or not. The data collected during the 3I Atlas's visit would be analysed for years, possibly decades. The technological insights embedded in its final transmission could advance human civilization by centuries, if we could understand and implement them safely. But the knowledge that we were being watched, studied and evaluated by intelligences beyond our current comprehension would forever change how we understood our place in the universe. As winter settled over the Earth and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, a small group of researchers continued their quiet vigil, monitoring the skies for signs of other visitors. They knew now that we were not alone, that our little blue world had attracted the attention of minds vast and cool and unsympathetic, to borrow a phrase from an earlier age of cosmic speculation. The story of 3I Atlas was over, but the larger story of humanity's relationship with extraterrestrial intelligence was just beginning, and in that beginning lay both the greatest opportunity and the greatest challenge our species had ever faced. The truth, as it always does, had found a way to emerge from the shadows of institutional secrecy and bureaucratic suppression. But the truth about 3I Atlas raised more questions than it answered, questions that touched the very foundations of consciousness, intelligence, and our understanding of reality itself. And those questions lead us naturally to our next exploration, a journey into the deepest mysteries of mind and matter, where quantum physics meets consciousness in ways that are revolutionizing our understanding of what it means to be aware, to observe, to exist in a universe stranger than we had ever imagined. Join us next time for Consciousness, a quantum mystery that's shocking scientists. Key Science for Sleep. The months that followed 3I Atlas's departure carried a peculiar quality of silence, like the moment after a thunderclap when the air itself seems to hold its breath. Those who had witnessed the truth found themselves living in two worlds simultaneously. The public world continued its familiar rhythms, with news cycles focused on terrestrial concerns and scientific journals publishing papers about conventional astronomical phenomena. But beneath this surface normality lay another reality, one inhabited by a small community of researchers who carried the weight of knowledge that could reshape human civilization. Dr. Foster discovered that the burden of extraordinary knowledge was heavier than she had anticipated. The radio telescope facility that had been her life's work now felt different, tinged with the understanding that every signal from space might carry implications far beyond academic interest. The quiet hum of electronics that had once been comforting now reminded her that somewhere in the cosmic darkness, other intelligences might be listening to our transmissions, analysing our conversations, drawing conclusions about our intentions and capabilities. The network that had formed to study 3i Atlas didn't simply dissolve after the object's departure. Instead, it evolved into something more permanent, more necessary. These researchers understood that they had witnessed not an isolated event, but a demonstration of capabilities that suggested a larger context, a cosmic community operating according to principles and timescales that dwarfed human experience. Dr. Chen found herself developing new protocols for signal analysis, techniques designed to detect the subtle patterns that had characterized 3i Atlas's communications. The mathematical structures embedded in those final transmissions continued to reveal new layers of meaning as sophisticated decryption methods were applied. Each breakthrough in understanding brought both excitement and trepidation, as the implications of what they were learning became increasingly profound. The technological insights contained within the object's final message were particularly challenging to process. The energy generation methods described in the mathematical relationships could solve humanity's climate crisis within decades. The propulsion systems could enable interstellar travel using principles that seemed to bend the fundamental laws of physics as currently understood. The materials science applications could revolutionize manufacturing, construction, and computing in ways that would make current technology appear primitive by comparison. But implementing such advances would require acknowledging their source, and that acknowledgement would inevitably lead to questions about how humanity had acquired knowledge so far beyond its current capabilities. The researchers found themselves guardians, not just of evidence about extraterrestrial intelligence, but of technologies that could transform human civilization, while simultaneously revealing the uncomfortable truth about how those technologies had been obtained. As we reach the end of our journey through the carefully constructed deception surrounding 3i Atlas, we find ourselves not with answers, but with profound questions about truth, knowledge, and our place in a universe far stranger than we had imagined. The evidence we've explored tonight reveals a pattern of institutional manipulation that extends far beyond a single interstellar visitor. It suggests a systematic approach to managing information that challenges our fundamental understanding of reality itself. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this story isn't the possibility that 3i Atlas was artificial, but the lengths to which established institutions went to suppress that possibility. The coordination of observations, the manipulation of data, the systematic discrediting of alternative theories, all point to a level of control over scientific discourse that should concern anyone who values truth over comfortable narratives. The researchers who risk their careers to pursue uncomfortable questions remind us that science advances not through consensus, but through the courage to challenge accepted paradigms. Their quiet persistence in the face of institutional pressure demonstrates that truth, like starlight, has a way of penetrating even the most carefully constructed darkness. As you drift off to sleep tonight, consider this. We live in an age where the most extraordinary discoveries might be hidden in plain sight, disguised as ordinary phenomena, managed by institutions that prefer familiar lies to transformative truths. The universe may be far more populated, far more active, far more aware of our existence than we've been allowed to believe. The story of 3i Atlas is ultimately a reminder that reality is often stranger than the stories we tell ourselves about it. And sometimes, the most important truths are found not in what we're told to see, but in what we're discouraged from looking for. Sweet dreams, fellow seekers of truth. And join us next time as we explore another mystery that challenges everything we think we know. In Consciousness, a quantum mystery that's shocking scientists. Science for sleep. As we reach the end of our journey through the carefully constructed deception surrounding 3i Atlas, we find ourselves not with answers, but with profound questions about truth, knowledge, and our place in a universe far stranger than we had imagined. The evidence we've explored tonight reveals a pattern of institutional manipulation that extends far beyond a single interstellar visitor. It suggests a systematic approach to managing information that challenges our fundamental understanding of reality itself. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this story isn't the possibility that 3i Atlas was artificial, but the lengths to which established institutions went to suppress that possibility. The coordination of observations, the manipulation of data, the systematic discrediting of alternative theories all point to a level of control over scientific discourse that should concern anyone who values truth over comfortable narratives. The researchers who risked their careers to pursue uncomfortable questions remind us that science advances not through consensus, but through the courage to challenge accepted paradigms. Their quiet persistence in the face of institutional pressure demonstrates that truth, like starlight, has a way of penetrating even the most carefully constructed darkness. As you drift off to sleep tonight, consider this. We live in an age where the most extraordinary discoveries might be hidden in plain sight, disguised as ordinary phenomena, managed by institutions that prefer familiar lies to transformative truths. The universe may be far more populated, far more active, far more aware of our existence than we've been allowed to believe. The story of 3i Atlas is ultimately a reminder that reality is often stranger than the stories we tell ourselves about it. And sometimes, the most important truths are found not in what we're told to see, but in what we're discouraged from looking for. Sweet dreams, fellow seekers of truth. Until we meet again under the vast canopy of stars, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember that the universe still holds secrets waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to look beyond the official narratives.